If you were born any time in the past 50 years, video games were likely a big part of your life. For me, a mid-2000s kid, Minecraft has always been the craze, a perfect game to play with your friends after school and have fun on. However, sometimes we don't consider how music really enhances and makes the gaming experience full. So let's go over some influential video game soundtracks. Video game music first began in Space Invaders, which had a repeating theme that looped at faster and faster intervals, depending on your progress throughout the game. This was done by Tomohiro Nishikado, a Japanese composer, the first testament to Japan's influence in the video game music industry. Later on, Rally X, a maze chase game, contained the first true melodic soundtrack, rather than the simple 4 notes that repeated in Space Invaders. As a third generation of 8-bit consoles rolled out around 1983, so did a whole new era of music. As far as what you need to know about the 8-bit consoles themselves, just know that the bigger the amount of bits, the less limitations there are to the music and the game itself. For example, you could have 0 to 255 rupees in the original Legend of Zelda, an 8-bit game, as 2 to the power of 8 is 256. Modern machines are usually 64-bit, which provides much less limitation. With the limitations, however, came Nintendo, which housed most of the notable composers in this era. This includes Koji Kondo, an extremely influential composer who made the iconic Super Mario theme, as well as the famous Legend of Zelda soundtrack. As you can tell though, the music is relatively limited as it all relied on a specific sound chip called the Rico 2A03, which could only provide a specific range of sounds. However, Koji Kondo has also been criticized for having melodies that heavily rely on familiarity, although this has also been credited as a strong suit of his video game melodies. Hirokazu Tanaka was another strong composer from Nintendo, making the soundtracks for the original Metroid in 1986. Of course, there were also composers not from Nintendo. Square Enix also had an extremely talented composer in Nobuo Uematsu, who solely composed the Final Fantasy soundtrack until the 10th rendition, Final Fantasy X, in 2001, at which point he was joined by 2 others. The original Final Fantasy soundtrack was less so significant for its own contributions, but more so for the amount of influence the franchise as a whole would garner as the years moved on. More on Nobuo Uematsu shortly. With the introduction of 16-bit systems, technology now had less restraint on what type of music could be made. 1991 led to many iconic and famous soundtracks. A company yet to have global success named Sega appeared around this time. Lo and behold, appeared a certain blue hedgehog, who would eventually take the world by storm. 3 years prior, a J-pop band called Dreams Come True was formed. The bassist, Masato Nakamura, would eventually be recruited by Sega to make the soundtrack for the original Sonic game, perhaps why so many tracks from it contain catchy, interwoven motives, something characteristic of someone with immense musical experience. Some other popular soundtracks in 1991 include the popular Guile's theme from Street Fighter, which is now recognized as an internet meme. What Guile's theme does demonstrate, however, is the quick technological progression from console. In 1989, we had the Sega Genesis. And in 1990, the SNES was released. As you can hear, there is a distinct difference in sound quality, which is due to the different sound chips used in the consoles. Of course, which version sounds better is simply based on personal preference. Koji Kondo continued his own thing in 1991, with the famous Fairy Fountain being released in the Zelda series. This is one of those songs that have been heavily remixed and heavily redistributed. If you didn't know, Fairy Fountain is actually based upon Waterland from the 1988 Super Mario Bros. Koji Kondo just loves to have reoccurring motives spanning games and franchises. A few years later, in 1995, Chrono Trigger was released by Square Enix. Oftentimes regarded to be one of the best video game albums of all time, players of the game often regard the soundtrack as one of the most memorable parts of the experience, even many decades later. Take a listen to decide for yourself. Here, the bulk of the soundtrack was composed by Japanese virtuoso Yasunori Mitsuda, with a few of the tracks made by Nobuo Uematsu. Reportedly, Yasunori Mitsuda had worked so hard on the soundtrack that he had passed out multiple times at one point, even being hospitalized. Often referred to as the 32-bit era, and the beginning of the 64-bit and 3D era, the 2000s were a transformative period for video games, as popular consoles such as the Game Boy Advance, PlayStation, and Nintendo 64 took over the video game market. With the release of the PlayStation a few years prior, came Silent Hill, an extremely important game which changed the approach of music in the survival horror genre. Previously, most soundtracks would play only in specific situations. What Silent Hill did was to create a score that played perpetually, which aids in never really giving you a moment to completely relax. Music plays a role in horror games that it does for no other genre of video games. Remove the ambient music from most modern day titles, and the games become literal walking simulators with occasional flashes on your screen. If we're talking about video games and music, Pokémon as a franchise has always been a titan, especially for music, of course, as Pokémon always seems to have some place in pop culture. There's also no real consensus as to the best generation of Pokémon for music, but the earlier generations always seem to garner more attention, perhaps due to the nostalgia attributed with the games. Personally, I view Generation 3 as my favorite generation, as it gave us classics like Little Root Town, Oldale Town, and numerous others. Generation 4 also has some great melodies sprinkled throughout the game, but I think this is purely an era-based thing. What you like is just what you like. Let me know your favorite generation's music in the comments below. In the 2000s, video game music wasn't yet highly regarded, but a certain video game changed that. Final Fantasy is similar to Pokémon in that it's also a franchise known for its music. In 2004, the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra, an internationally regarded orchestra founded over a century ago, gave a live performance of the Final Fantasy soundtrack. This was groundbreaking because a video game soundtrack had now reached mainstream media. More specifically though, this was more important because video game music had now acquired its own standalone genre, rather than simply being idle accompaniment. For the rest of the 2000s, music flourished, with many other popular soundtracks. This includes GTA San Andreas, Super Smash Brawl, and Assassin's Creed, which came with the popular Ezio's family, a composition notable at the time for the clear production value. Despite technically only being a particular soundtrack in the game Assassin's Creed 2, the entire franchise has picked it up as its official theme. Why is that? Well, to answer this, we also need to address why so many people seem to think that older video games have better music. Just hold on, this is relevant, trust me. Melody and voice acting can easily come into conflict, as melodies engage the same part of our brain used for vocals. Hence, an explanation for this is that older video games rarely contain vocals, and since they don't contain vocals, stronger, bolder melodies can be used. This is often why older music may be perceived as better. Think of the most iconic video game soundtracks, You might think of Song of Storms or Lost Woods. With Assassin's Creed, this moment was important for the story, and it was devoid of any sort of voice acting that may have detracted the climax's ability to stand out. Hence, it became popular, and became the central theme of the franchise. Ezio's family really is an amazing piece, and it utilizes a voice sort of as an instrument, which is especially obvious here, as the voice seamlessly transitions into the regal sound of a violin. If you want to read more into this phenomenon, there will be a link for the article in the description. As we move into the 2010s, it's important to note a specific genre of video games that doesn't really have a name, but is sort of recognized by everyone to share a common thread. I call these the pop culture games. GTA, NBA 2K, FIFA, and Tony Hawk are just a few that ride on this list, and these games are all special in that they share a connection to a particular demographic. Hence, soundtracks in these games often used trendy or commonly streamed music at the time, which provided opportunities for artists to be shown on these video games. For example, we have FIFA, which exemplifies this. Appealing to a teenage audience, its soundtrack can be immediately recognized to cater to this, with just a few artists including Portugal the Man, most notable for his hit song Feel It Still, Billie Eilish, and Avicii. This idea also applies to the GTA San Andreas soundtrack, except it more so reflects the setting of the game, rather than that of the people playing it, although it may overlap. In a game heavily based on the image of the hood and gang violence, the music is very fitting for that demographic. If we look at GTA's soundtrack, nearly everything was a song already popular on the radio at the time, except for its central theme. Notable artists here include Tupac, Slick Rick, all popular rappers. Soul and funk also occupy a significant part of the GTA San Andreas discography, which is another genre that is widespread in African American culture. 2011 was a huge year for video game music, with many big releases. Civilization IV became the first video game to win a Grammy. Video games were finally being recognized by the music industry with a mainstream music award. A few months later, in May of 2011, Terraria was released. It served to bring back that 8-bit feel in music and gameplay that so many people longed for, and had unfortunately fizzled out as 32-bit systems were popularized. Terraria became iconic for its simple but catchy melodies, but also for its iconic approach to boss music, where the backing theme drastically changes to fit the atmosphere of a fight. Although it's not the first game to do this, it's definitely known for it. Currently playing in the background is a soundtrack from a modded version of Terraria named Calamity, a rare case where the modded version's music is arguably as popular, if not more popular than the original. In the latter half of 2011, Minecraft was released. Now, I really don't want to overstate how important the Minecraft soundtrack is to me, and millions of other people born in the 2000s, but I think understating it would be worse. There's no other game that would have every moment seemingly built around the music, but this is why I dare to say that Volume Alpha, made by C418, is one of the most influential video game music albums of all time. This isn't exactly a hot opinion either. In fact, it's the most popular opinion. My favorite track off Alpha has got to be Subwoofer Lullaby. Most of the game is actually silent, and you're kind of left in the game to do whatever lonely task you may be doing. But when the music hits, the world suddenly feels alive and just not so lonely anymore. It is this silence, however, and this pause in the music, that makes the soundtrack just that much more emotional and memorable. Soft, melancholic chords are C418's specialty. However, in Minecraft's second album, Volume Beta, C418 gets a lot more experimental. This is why I love Aria Math. It's got a really strong cinematic feel to it, which C418 accomplishes with a slow but constant build-up throughout the song. The handpan, which is the main instrument of Aria Math, has a super reverby feel, which makes the soundstage feel wider than it perhaps is. In 2017, following the pattern of the first two albums of Minecraft, which were named using the Greek alphabet, C418 announced his work on the third album, called Minecraft Volume Gamma. There are some qualms about the true name of the album, as many people also refer to it as Volume Final. Later in 2021, C418 stated that Minecraft had simply gotten too big, and reaching an agreement about his music had become increasingly difficult. Hence, despite stating to have finished composition of the album in interview, the album was never officially released. C418's roots truly are in indie music, which is what Minecraft initially started off as, an indie video game, not the corporate mosh pit it sort of is nowadays. On the topic of indie video games in the 2010s, Undertale is practically unavoidable. True to the genre, Undertale had all art, gameplay, and music development done by Toby Fox, the sole creator of the game. Its soundtrack was inspired by many different games, such as Earthbound and Touhou games, of which the gameplay is also based upon, as it uses a mix between turn-based and bullet hell to create its unique combat system. Many people also believe Yume Nikki to be an inspiration for Undertale's music, as many elements are similar in vibe and ambience. To me at least, Undertale is notable for being one of the few video game soundtracks where every single piece is unique and great to listen to. There's also an orchestral arrangement to the entire soundtrack, which I'll provide a link for. Listen to Asgore, it is probably my favorite here. Persona 5, released in 2017, is a turn-based JRPG, and is also a video game known for its music, with a cult following swearing by it. While doing research for this video, I found this website called KH Insider, I don't know how to pronounce that, Kinsider, which provides a top 1000 video game soundtrack list based on fan voting. Here, number 1 is Minecraft, and sitting at number 2 is Persona 5. Now, I'm not saying I swear off this tier list, as Undertale isn't even in the top 100, yet fucking Brawl Stars is, which is ridiculous. But I am trying to use this to say that Persona is definitely significant in some form to some people. The reason I mentioned Persona here is to prove a point, to discuss what makes some specific soundtracks more recognizable in the video game discography. There seem to be two main reasons, both probably valid. Games where the music is accelerated by silence and calm, and games where the music is accelerated by intense battle or gameplay. With games such as Persona and Minecraft, it seems that the most memorable soundtracks occur in times of silence. For Minecraft, this is the entire gameplay experience, perhaps why its music is so highly regarded. Similarly for Persona, the vocal version of Beneath the Mask only plays at nighttime, when the environment is quiet and ambient, allowing the music to shine. Unlike Minecraft though, this track is also just extremely prevalent throughout the game, which allows it to imprint on you. Most of the daytime gameplay is actually consumed by other tasks, such as the dungeons, or palaces rather, so you often return home at nighttime. As mentioned, Beneath the Mask plays at nighttime, so this coincidence causes it to be especially memorable on the discography. On the flip side, we have games like Terraria and Undertale, where the most emotional and memorable pieces are found during boss fights, where chaos is arguably the greatest and should be detracting the most from the music. The best specific example here is Megalovania, a song played in the highest of climaxes in Undertale. Of course, some of Undertale's strongest pieces are also during relaxing parts of the gameplay, which sort of proves both reasons correct. As the years continue to fly by, we can really see the influences of the games mentioned prior. Some popular games include Omori, an indie game released in 2020, bearing a striking resemblance to Undertale in its music feel and composition. Genshin Impact, also released in 2020, shares an approach to music similar to Minecraft and Zelda, the former likely inspiring Genshin's method to having periods of silence in gameplay, and then naturally letting music flow in. Video game music has interwoven influences, and every piece of history is relevant. Although, of course, my video is not comprehensive, I hope you learned something new and really enjoyed the video. This video has been a long time in the making. Next year, I'll be getting really busy with school, so videos will be far and few in between. Although not really different from my current upload schedule. By the way, what's playing in the background is a song my friend made, so if you want to check it out, I'll leave the link in the description. I really appreciate all the support, and I just wanted you to know that I also read every comment. Although I may not respond or heart your comment because there's just so many, I really do appreciate everything. Thanks for watching.